You're from Toronto, so you say in your book that when you were studying at the University of Toronto, you had it good. You either had fun summer jobs, sometimes you didn't have a summer job at all. There were golden years for you with very good professors at the University of Toronto. Tell us about these golden years.
Well, I went to university between 1960 and 64. After the war, the governments were spending, there was a baby boom. So they were preparing for this baby boom to enter the universities, and they had been pouring money into the universities, enlarging them, paying tremendous salaries to famous teachers to come from all over the place. In the English department, where I was, we had professors from Scotland, from England, top American professors, because they were being paid a ton of money to come. And so it was a time of great expansion. It was a time when women were starting to go to university in greater numbers. I just hit the jackpot in terms of the timing. And it was during a period of expansion and lavish spending, but it was before the time of ideology taking over the universities. So I had the best of both worlds, great professors, but none of them were politicizing us. I don't know what their political opinions were. We were learning our subject, and we were learning it in objective ways. So it was a wonderful time. There were not many women on campus compared to how many we were. It was still very elite. It was still a very elite bunch of people that went to university because it was not considered a right that everybody went. So you had to earn your way into the university. So maybe 8% of high school graduates went to university, and of those maybe 2% were women. So you had a feeling that this was a very special thing to be doing, and you were very grateful. And there wasn't that sense of mass education and dumbing down of education that I see in the universities today.
I guess standards must have been fairly high.
They certainly were in my honor. I was in an honor program, which meant that no class I was ever in had more than 30 students. And many of them had like 10 or 12. We had seminars around the professors in his office, around their tables. By fourth year, all our classes were with the professor, and we never had teaching, like assistant, what are they called, teaching assistants. We had professors. We sat around their seminar tables in their offices, and those were our classes. It was golden, I'm telling you, golden years.
So when do you think it started to go wrong? Why did it go wrong?
Well, it was the 1960s. It was the counterculture. It was this whole. It was Vietnam. There was this whole idea that everything that went before the establishment had to be turfed out. It was all wrong. It was bad. It was elitist. And there was this revolutionary idea that you couldn't trust anyone over 30, and that this youth, this idea that youth knew better, the sexual revolution, the pill, if you put all these things together, Vietnam, the rebellion against authority, put it all together, and you got, and of course, the rise of Marxist-dominated theory. So put that all together, and it was a recipe for an atmosphere in university that had very little to do with respect for learning, but a great deal to do with narcissistic self-expression.
I sometimes get the feeling that the counterculture won.
Yes, they did.
Was, in fact, the culture we have today is the counterculture.
Yeah, we are in the counterculture, yes.
And that explains why we're just so out of sync. It really feels funny.
They did win. They did win. And those young people that were rebelling in the 1960s and throwing computers out of windows, or not computers because they were too big in those days, but were throwing typewriters, whatever, paper out of university windows, and barricading university principals in their offices. They are the professors today, and they're not retiring. And they are also the professors who hire the new professors. So we have a situation in the universities where anybody who thinks the way I do, or you do, or some of us here, is actually beating against a current and having a tough time having their voice heard, if they can get into the universities as an academic at all. That's, it's a battle just to get in.
Now, you were also talking in your first essay about a change in the cultural zeitgeist, where it used to be the culture was favorable to Jews, and to heterosexual men.
That,
and now that's changed.
Yeah, I grew up, I start my essay by saying the two things that define me more than anything are the fact that I was born Jewish and born a woman. And in both cases, I hit the jackpot because I was born at a time very close to the end of the war, when anti-Semitism was considered a disgraceful thing, a shameful thing, and it totally went underground, and where we all believed that anti-Semitism was okay, that it was the Holocaust was unbelievable, but the one good thing that's going to come out of it is that we will never see anti-Semitism again, because it will be considered just impossible that anybody could possibly be an anti-Semite. So as a Jew, I grew up in a time of, certainly there was some social anti-Semitism, but of such a mild variety, it had no effect on me. And opportunity. And same, I was never denied an opportunity to do anything. Nobody I know was, But at the same time, also as a woman, it was also a golden time, because it was the cusp of the feminist revolution in its good phase, in phase one, where it was actually a reform movement. So I had the best of both worlds.
I'm from Montreal, and I'm not from Toronto, but I grew up in Montreal, and I just had my high school reunion 2 weeks ago, my 40th reunion. It was like 80% Jewish. It was a very, very interesting thing. Like you, I mean, growing up in Montreal, I went to an English Protestant school. We used to get like 45 minutes of English, French instruction per day. It was a very, very poor French instruction, and we all struggled with French, and all my friends really are very poor, or graduated from high school. It was very, very poor French.
Yeah, when I first came to Montreal, I was 21, newly married, and the first thing I felt that I really ought to do was to become far more proficient in French. I had a very good French instruction in high school. My grammar was good. I really knew the language in a passive sense, but I had never had the opportunity. So I thought, well, I really must start learning French. And all my friends, my new friends, my husband's friends, said, you don't have to speak French in Montreal. Everybody speaks English, and there's no need. So I was, well, all right. And I was the stupidest thing I ever did was to listen to these people, many of whom, by the way, still struggle with French, and they live very, very circumscribed lives. And at some point, it was only about 20 years ago, when I said, you know what, this is crazy. I have to learn French. So I really applied myself. I had private teachers. I watched French TV. I was reading, and I went up to Jonquière for a couple of weeks, first for 2 weeks, and then a year. Once a year, I'd go for a week, to immerse myself. I didn't become totally fluent, but I became very functional. And that was the best thing that I ever did, because who knew I was going to be a journalist? But as a journalist, I can now go on French TV and go on French radio. That was a good decision, but I wish I'd made it 50 years ago and not 20 years ago.
I think you were quite proud of the first time you went on a TV show speaking French.
I had such a stage fright. I don't think I've ever been as afraid of anything in my entire life as the first time I was on French TV, and it was direct, it was live. And I just had to do it. And I wasn't great at all, but no, you didn't see me the first time. I was on Dutrasac the first time, and I was so terrified. But each time that I go on, I'm a little more confident, and actually they respect me for it. And I actually get asked a fair amount, because there's not that many Anglos that are active in politics or active in, that are also, I don't call myself bilingual or fluent, but I can cope. I can cope with the questions and the answers.
Now, you talk in your book about the whole French language and the language laws, but haven't the English community of Quebec, they were sort of abandoned by the rest of Canada?
Oh, were they ever? Yeah, that was the federal government and the rest of Canada made a deal with themselves that, okay, if what it took to appease Quebec was to allow them to ignore the Constitution and to ignore minority language rights that are embedded in every democratic country, the rights of education, which we have a constitutional right to, that the UN says is a right to educate children it's an official language in Quebec, English. They said, we'll throw the English under the bus. For Bill 101, the Supreme Court said the same thing. They didn't say it, they didn't put it that way. But it was like a deal with the devil. Okay, we'll let the English suffer so that Quebec will feel masters in their own house, and that will be the end of our problems. Ha ha ha. It never is, but yes, they made that deal. And they still ignore that. The whole language thing is something. It's interesting that the government is now coming in to intervene on the Clarity Bill, but they would not intervene with either Bill 101 or the proposed Bill 14.
Now, I just want to change topics slightly. You write in there's a lot of in your book about feminism and men's rights, and you got a good life, but you say feminists have the image of the disaffected wife sitting at home. Were you a disaffected wife sitting at home?
No, you see, one of the reasons that I didn't buy into the whole feminist thing was, like, I read Betty Friedan's book, and she called housewives, what was it, the quiet concentration camp, or she pictured women as sitting at home, doing nothing, raising their children, cooking meals, and waiting for their husband to come home. Nobody I know had that life. We all stayed home with our children, but we were doing lots of other things. We were volunteers. We were in book clubs. We were, doing sports. We were not like that. And even in my mother's generation, they were not doing that. They were all either volunteering somewhere. They led active lives. Their minds were, they never felt that way, that they were living some desperate life of boredom and tedium. It wasn't like that. So I felt, well, that's a lie. That was one of the lies that I felt that I wanted to. Not that I feel that everybody has to stay home. I'm quite aware that the world has changed, and that's fine. Women should work if they want. But staying home with your children is not pure, unadulterated hell. That's for sure.
And a lot of women today choose to stay at home with their children.
Because they found out that it was a big lie, that the only thing that was important was your career. They miss their children. They want to be home with their children. I stayed home with my children because I didn't want somebody else raising them. I was very lucky that my husband made enough money that I could stay home. For me, it was like a gift. Like, I feel sorry for women